To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Wesley Greenwood had learned to trust his instincts during his 8 years as a military intelligence analyst in the Marine Corps. Those instincts had kept him alive in places where hesitation meant death, and they'd served him well in his civilian life as a data forensics consultant. But lately, those same instincts had been whispering warnings about his father-in-law, Julius Bender, warnings Wesley had chosen to ignore because he wanted to believe in the sanctity of family. The Greenwood home in suburban Portland was a modest 2-story colonial, the kind of place where neighbors actually knew each other's names. Wesley and his wife, Melissa, had bought it 3 years ago, right after their wedding. Their daughter, Emma, had arrived 10 months later, a screaming, beautiful 8-pound miracle that had transformed their entire world. Julius Bender had seemed like the model grandfather. At 62, he was a retired pharmaceutical sales representative with silver hair, an easy smile, and a genuine laugh that could fill a room. He'd been devoted to Emma from day one, showing up with gifts, offering to babysit, sharing stories about raising Melissa and her younger sister, Camille. His wife, Teresa, had passed away from cancer 2 years before Emma's birth, and Julius often said his granddaughter had given him a reason to keep living. But Wesley had noticed things, small things that his analytical mind cataloged even as he dismissed them. The way Julius's smile never quite reached his eyes when he held Emma. The phone calls he'd abruptly end when Wesley entered a room. The nervous energy that seemed to pulse beneath his grandfatherly exterior. The fact that Julius had suddenly become far more interested in Wesley and Melissa's schedules, always asking when they might need a babysitter, practically begging for opportunities to be alone with Emma. "You're overthinking it," Melissa had said 3 weeks ago when Wesley mentioned his concerns. She was sitting on their bed, brushing her auburn hair, getting ready for sleep. "Dad's just lonely since Mom died. Emma makes him happy. Isn't that a good thing?" Wesley had dropped it. Because what was he supposed to say? "Your father creeps me out even though he hasn't actually done anything wrong." That would have gone over well. Now, on this Friday evening in late October, Wesley was adjusting his tie in the bedroom mirror while Melissa applied her makeup at the vanity. It was their 5th wedding anniversary, and they had reservations at Carmine's, an Italian restaurant downtown that had been booked solid for months. "Did you pack Emma's overnight bag?" Melissa asked, leaning close to the mirror to apply mascara. "Checked it twice," Wesley confirmed. "Diapers, formula, her favorite blanket, the works. Your dad has our cell numbers, the restaurant number, and I left the list of emergency contacts on the fridge." Melissa turned to him with a radiant smile. At 32, she still took his breath away, the same woman he'd fallen for 6 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. "You know Dad's done this before. He'll be fine." "I know." Wesley forced a smile. "Just want to make sure everything's covered." The doorbell rang at 5:45 p.m. Julius stood on the porch wearing khakis and a cardigan, looking every bit the doting grandfather. "The lovebirds ready for their big night?" he called out cheerfully as Wesley opened the door. "Come in, Dad," Melissa said, rushing down the stairs with Emma in her arms. The 10-month-old was gurgling happily, her blonde curls bouncing. "Thanks again for doing this. I know it's last minute." "Last minute? I've had this marked on my calendar for weeks." Julius reached for Emma, who went to him without fuss. "We're going to have so much fun, aren't we, Princess? Maybe Grandpa will even let you stay up past your bedtime." Wesley grabbed their coats from the closet. "She should go down around 7:30. She's been a little fussy with her teething, so there's baby Tylenol in the diaper bag." "I know," Julius interrupted gently. "Wesley, I raised 2 daughters. I think I can handle one baby for a few hours. Right?" "Sorry." Wesley felt foolish. He was being overprotective, letting his paranoia get the better of him. They went through the house tour, showing Julius where everything was, though he'd been there dozens of times. The formula was in the kitchen cabinet. Emma's favorite stuffed elephant was in the crib. The baby monitor was already on. The alarm system code was 4-7-2-1, though Julius knew that too. "Oh, and the Ring doorbell is active," Wesley mentioned as they headed toward the door. "So if anyone comes by, we'll get an alert on our phones." Something flickered across Julius's face, too quick for Wesley to identify. Then the older man smiled. Technology these days. When Melissa was a baby, We didn't have any of that. Different times, Wesley agreed, though his instincts were humming again. They left at 6:05 p.m., Melissa practically glowing with excitement. It was the first time they'd been out alone together since Emma was born. Wesley pushed his concerns down deep, determined to give his wife the anniversary she deserved. Chapter 2. The Alert. Carmine's was everything they'd hoped for: dim lighting, excellent wine, and food that made Melissa close her eyes in appreciation with every bite. They talked about everything except Emma for the first hour, reconnecting as husband and wife instead of just co-parents. Wesley felt himself relaxing, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. At 7:45 p.m., his phone buzzed. Ring doorbell alert. Wesley frowned and pulled out his phone while Melissa was mid-sentence about potentially taking a vacation next summer. The app loaded slowly, and his heart rate picked up inexplicably, that old combat alertness flooding his system. The video showed Julius Bender on their front porch at 7:43 p.m., just 2 minutes ago. He was carrying a large black suitcase, the kind you'd take on a week-long trip. He looked around nervously, then unlocked the door with the key they'd given him and disappeared inside with the suitcase. Wesley's blood ran cold. "Wes? What's wrong?" Melissa asked, noticing his expression. He turned the phone toward her without a word, replaying the footage. Melissa's face went pale. "Why does he have a suitcase?" "He said he was staying at our house all night." Wesley was already on his feet, throwing cash on the table, way more than their bill, but he didn't care. "Call him. Now." Melissa's hands shook as she dialed her father's number. The restaurant noise faded into the background as Wesley listened to the phone ring. Once, twice, 3 times. "Hello." Julius's voice sounded normal, cheerful even. "Dad? Where are you?" Melissa's voice cracked. "I'm at your house with Emma, sweetheart. Where else would I be? She just went down for the night. Fought it a little, but she's sleeping like an angel now." Wesley grabbed the phone from Melissa. "Julius, I just got a ring alert showing you arriving at our house 7 minutes ago with a suitcase. Want to explain that?" A pause. "Too long." "Oh, that? I just ran home to grab some of my medications. Forgot them when I came over earlier. No big deal." "You live 40 minutes away," Wesley said coldly. "That means you left Emma alone for over an hour." No. I had my neighbor Santos watch her." "You left our infant daughter with a stranger?" Melissa's voice rose to a near shriek, drawing stares from nearby tables. "Santos isn't a stranger. He's a retired teacher, perfectly safe." Wesley hung up. His mind was racing through scenarios, each worse than the last. "We're going home. Now." The drive back took 23 minutes, though Wesley barely remembered it. He was operating on pure instinct now, the same mode that had kept him sharp in Afghanistan. Melissa was crying in the passenger seat, calling her father over and over, getting no answer now. "He wouldn't hurt her," Melissa kept saying. "He loves her. He wouldn't." "I know." Wesley lied, though he didn't know anything anymore. They pulled into their driveway at 8:17 p.m. The house was dark except for the living room lamp. Wesley was out of the car before the engine stopped, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. The door was locked. He fumbled with his keys, adrenaline making his hands clumsy. The house was silent. Too silent. "Emma." Melissa pushed past him, racing toward the nursery upstairs. Wesley went to the living room first, his training taking over. Assess the situation. Identify threats. The room looked normal at first glance. Baby toys on the floor, burp cloths on the couch. Then he noticed the nursery monitor was turned off. The one they'd specifically shown Julius was on. Melissa's scream cut through the house like a blade. Wesley took the stairs 4 at a time. The nursery door was open, and Melissa stood frozen in the doorway, her hands over her mouth, sobs racking her body. The crib was empty, but that wasn't the horrifying part. The room had been ransacked, drawers pulled open, clothes scattered, the window broken from the outside with glass on the floor. A staged burglary scene. Except Wesley's trained eye caught the details that didn't fit. The glass shards were on the carpet inside, yes, but there was no glass on the outside windowsill. The angle was wrong. Someone had broken the window from inside and scattered glass to make it look like an entry point. The drawers that were ransacked had been carefully emptied. Nothing was actually damaged or torn. Professional staging. And on the changing table, partially hidden under a receiving blanket, was Julius's wallet. Left behind accidentally, or so it would seem. But inside it, Wesley found something that made his blood freeze. A business card, New Horizons Family Services, Confidential Adoption Solutions, with a phone number and an address in Seattle. Wesley's mind connected the dots in seconds. This wasn't a panicked grandfather having a mental break. This was planned, calculated. His father-in-law had stolen their daughter and made it look like a random burglary, probably to sell her through an illegal adoption ring. "Call 911, Wesley said, his voice deadly calm. "Tell them Emma's been kidnapped." Melissa collapsed on the floor, still sobbing. Wesley pulled out his phone and did something he'd sworn he'd never do again. He called in a favor from his old Marine Corps unit. Chapter 3. The Discovery. Detective David Parrish arrived at 8:47 p.m. with 2 uniformed officers and a forensics team. He was a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Wesley had dealt with him once before on a fraud case for one of his corporate clients. "Mr. Greenwood," Parrish said, shaking his hand. "Walk me through what happened." Wesley laid it out chronologically, showing him the ring footage, explaining the timeline, pointing out the inconsistencies in the staged crime scene. Parrish listened without interrupting, taking notes. "And your father-in-law, Julius Bender, he has a key to your house." "Yes, we trusted him." Wesley's jaw clenched. That was a mistake. Parrish examined the business card. "New Horizons Family Services. I'll have my team look into it. But off the record, this has all the hallmarks of a black market adoption operation. We've been hearing whispers about something operating in the Pacific Northwest, but nothing concrete." Melissa had been sedated by the paramedics and was lying on the couch with her younger sister, Camille Haynes, who'd arrived 20 minutes earlier. Camille was 28, a yoga instructor with a fierce protective streak. She kept shooting death glares at nothing, as if she could kill Julius Bender with pure hatred. "How long before you can trace him?" Wesley asked. "We've got an APB out on his vehicle. We're tracking his phone, checking traffic cameras. If he's still in the state, we'll find him." Parrish hesitated. "But Mr. Greenwood, if this is what I think it is, if he's connected to an organized ring, they move fast. They might have already transferred Emma to." "Don't." Wesley cut him off. "Just don't." After Parrish left to coordinate the search, Wesley went down to his basement office and locked the door. This room was his sanctuary, lined with computer equipment, 3 monitors, and enough hardware to run a small intelligence operation. Old habits died hard. He pulled up the ring footage again, this time on his large monitor, and began analyzing it frame by frame. Julius's body language showed stress, darting eyes, checking his phone repeatedly. The suitcase was heavy. Julius had struggled with it, slightly going up the steps. Wesley enhanced the image. On the suitcase was a baggage tag from SeaTac Airport, partially visible. He zoomed in, cleaned up the pixels. The flight number was partially legible, AS1, something. Alaska Airlines. Departing SeaTac. He cross-referenced Julius's credit cards. He'd gotten access to his father-in-law's information months ago, when Julius had asked him to help set up online banking. The old man wasn't tech-savvy, had used his birthday as his password for everything. There. A charge from Alaska Airlines, dated for today. Flight AS-1547, departing at 11:55 p.m. Destination, Mexico City. Wesley checked the time, 9:23 p.m. Just over 2 hours until takeoff. He dove deeper, hacking into Julius's email account. It wasn't even hacking, really. The man's password was Melissa1991, his daughter's name and birth year. Pathetically simple. The emails painted a picture of desperation and greed. Julius had lost over $200,000 in bad stock investments 6 months ago. He'd borrowed money from a loan shark named Maurice Garner. The interest had compounded viciously. He was drowning in debt, staring at bankruptcy and worse. Then, 3 months ago, a different tone in the emails. Julius had been contacted by someone named Santos Dotson from New Horizons Family Services. They had a proposal. Healthy infant babies could fetch $50,000 to $150,000 from wealthy international couples who couldn't adopt through legal channels. Julius had resisted at first. The emails showed his reluctance. "I can't betray my family like this." But Santos had been persuasive, and the debt had been crushing. The emails grew darker. "Your granddaughter is perfect. Blonde, healthy, no medical issues. We have a buyer in Mexico City willing to pay $120,000. You'll clear your debts and have money left over." Wesley felt physically ill reading them. But he kept going, documenting everything. The plan had been meticulous. Julius would babysit on the anniversary night. At 8 p.m., he'd stage the burglary, take Emma to a safe house in Seattle, and tomorrow morning, she'd be on a private plane to Mexico City. By the time anyone realized it wasn't a random kidnapping, the trail would be cold. But Julius had made mistakes. He'd left his wallet. He'd been sloppy with the crime scene staging. And he'd underestimated Wesley. Wesley found the safe house address in a text message, 4782 Pinecrest Lane, Seattle, a rental property owned by Santos Dodson. He had a choice. Go to the police with this information and hope they moved fast enough, or handle it himself. Wesley had promised Melissa he'd left that part of his life behind, the part that operated in moral gray zones, that bent rules and sometimes broke them entirely for the greater good. He'd promised to be a civilian, a consultant, a husband and father. But his daughter was in the hands of criminals. And sometimes, the system moved too slowly. Wesley pulled out a burner phone he kept for encrypted client communications and made a call. "It's Greenwood," he said when the line connected. "I need the team. Tonight." The voice on the other end, Chris Williams, his former unit mate, didn't hesitate. "Address." Wesley gave him the Seattle safe house location. "Time frame." "I'm 2 hours out." "Can you hold?" "Negative. I'm going in first. You're backup and cleanup." "Wesley, you can't." "My daughter, Chris. They took my daughter." A pause. "We'll be there." "And Wes? We'll get her back." Wesley went upstairs and found Melissa sleeping fitfully on the couch, Camille watching over her. The younger woman looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Do you know where she is?" Camille asked quietly. "Maybe. I'm going to check something out." "The police are doing their best. But I'm not waiting." Wesley grabbed his jacket and a black duffel bag from the hall closet. Inside were tools he'd hoped never to use again. Camille stood up. "I'm coming with you." "No. That's my niece. My father did this. I'm coming." Wesley studied her. Camille was tough. He knew that. She'd done 2 tours with Doctors Without Borders in some of the world's worst hellholes. She wasn't fragile. "Stay in the car when we get there," he finally said. "And if this goes south, you drive away and call Parrish." "Understood." She nodded. They left through the back door at 9:45 p.m. Seattle was 2.5 hours away. Emma's flight was scheduled to leave at 11:55 p.m. The race was on. Chapter 4, The Safe House. The drive to Seattle should have taken 2.5 hours, but Wesley made it in 97 minutes, pushing his Dodge Charger well past legal speeds on I-5. Camille sat rigid in the passenger seat, white-knuckling the handle, but she didn't complain once. Pinecrest Lane was in a rundown neighborhood south of SeaTac Airport, the kind of area where people minded their own business and didn't call the cops for every suspicious noise. The rental house at 4782 was a squat, single-story rambler with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. A silver Honda Accord sat in the driveway, Julius's car. Wesley parked 3 houses down and killed the lights. It was 11:18 p.m., 37 minutes until the flight. "There's a light on in the back," Camille whispered, pointing. Wesley was already pulling gear from his duffel, a tactical flashlight, lock picks, his old K-bar knife, and something he'd never told Melissa he owned, a Glock 19 with a suppressor. He checked the magazine out of habit, muscle memory taking over. "Jesus, Wes," Camille breathed. "Stay in the car. Doors locked. Engine running. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, or if anyone else shows up, you drive away and call Detective Parrish." He rattled off the number. "What if Emma?" "I'll have her." Wesley's voice was steel. "Trust me." He moved through the shadows like he'd been trained to do, approaching the house from the side yard where the neighbor's fence provided cover. The grass was wet from earlier rain, muffling his footsteps. He could hear voices from inside, male, arguing. Wesley reached the lit window and peered through a gap in the curtains. Julius Bender sat at a kitchen table, looking haggard and decades older than he had that afternoon. Across from him sat a man Wesley recognized from the driver's license photo he'd pulled up, Santos Dodson, a heavy-set man in his 50s with slicked-back hair and dead eyes. A third man stood by the back door, arms crossed. Younger, muscular, probably security. And in the corner, in a car seat on the floor, was Emma. She was sleeping, unharmed, perfect. Wesley's relief was so intense it nearly buckled his knees. She was alive. She was close. Now he just had to get her out. Can't do this, Julius was saying, his voice cracking. I changed my mind. I want to call it off. Santos laughed, a sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. Call it off? Julius, we have a buyer waiting in Mexico City. The plane leaves in 30 minutes. You're getting your money, we're getting our cut, and this conversation is over. She's my granddaughter. Julius's voice broke. I thought I could go through with it, but I can't. When I saw her sleeping in that crib, I can't. You should have thought of that before you racked up gambling debts with Maurice Garner, Santos said coldly. You know what Maurice does to people who don't pay? They don't just get their legs broken. They disappear. Their families disappear. Is that what you want? The security guard by the door shifted his weight. Boss, we need to move. The driver's already at the airport. Santos stood up. Julius, you're going to get in your car, drive home, and wait for the police to question you about the burglary. You'll cry, you'll play the devastated grandfather, and in a week, this will all be over. You'll have your money, your debts cleared, and everyone moves on. I'm calling the police, Julius said, reaching for his phone. Santos moved faster than a man his size should have been able to move. He grabbed Julius's wrist, twisted it sharply, and slammed it down on the table. The phone skittered across the floor. You're not calling anyone. We own you now, Julius. You're as deep in this as we are. You think the cops will believe you? You staged the crime scene. You took the baby. You're on camera at their house with a suitcase. You're going to prison either way unless you do exactly what we say. Emma stirred in her car seat, making a small sound. Wesley's finger moved to the trigger. He could take Santos first, then the guard, then. His phone buzzed. A text from Chris, 5 minutes out. Hold position. 5 minutes. Emma would be gone in 5 minutes if they loaded her into a car. Wesley couldn't wait. He moved to the back door and tested the knob silently. Locked. He pulled out his picks and began working on it, his hands steady despite the adrenaline. The lock was cheap, simple. It took him 40 seconds. The door clicked open. Wesley moved inside in one fluid motion, the Glock raised, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Nobody moves. Santos spun around, his hand going for something in his jacket. Don't, Wesley said, his aim never wavering. Hands where I can see them. You too, he added to the guard. Julius's face went white. Wesley, how did you? Shut up. Wesley's eyes never left Santos. You're going to sit down, put your hands on the table, and tell me everything about your operation. Who else is involved? Where the other children are? All of it. Santos smiled, showing yellow teeth. You think you're the first angry parent to show up waving a gun? You're not going to shoot me. You're a civilian now, playing soldier. And the second you pull that trigger, you're a murderer. Try me, Wesley said softly. The guard by the door made his move, going for a weapon at his back. Wesley shot him in the shoulder, a suppressed thwip that sounded like nothing more than a loud cough. The guard went down screaming, clutching his arm. Santos's smile vanished. You crazy son of a... On the ground. Now. Wesley's voice was arctic. Santos complied, moving slowly. Julius was sobbing at the table. Wesley moved to Emma, never taking his eyes off the two men, and checked her over. She was fine, still sleeping, drugged probably. The rage that flooded him nearly made him pull the trigger again. Headlights swept across the front window. A black SUV pulled up, and Chris Williams emerged with two other men from Wesley's old unit, Benny Barrera and Lucas Hudson. They entered through the front door like professionals, weapons drawn, securing the scene in seconds. Christ, Wes, Chris said, surveying the situation. You couldn't wait 5 minutes? He moved, Wesley said, nodding at the bleeding guard. Force my hand. Benny zip-tied both Santos and the guard while Lucas checked on Emma. She's breathing fine. Probably just sleeping medication. We should get her to a hospital to be safe. Wesley holstered his weapon and picked up his daughter, holding her against his chest. She was warm and perfect and alive, and his hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting him. What do we do with these two? Chris asked, nudging Santos with his boot. Wesley looked at Julius, who wouldn't meet his eyes. My father-in-law is going to tell Detective Parrish everything. Every name, every buyer, every location. He's going to cooperate fully, and in exchange, I won't personally ensure he spends the rest of his miserable life in the worst hole I can find. Julius nodded frantically. Yes, yes, I'll tell them everything. I'm sorry, Wesley. I'm so sorry. Save it. Wesley turned to Santos. And you're going to tell me who Maurice Garner is and where I can find him. Santos spat on the floor. Go to hell. Wesley handed Emma to Chris and crouched down next to Santos, his voice dropping to a whisper only the man could hear. You know what I did before I became a consultant? I extracted confessions from terrorists in Afghanistan. I got really good at it. Now, you can tell me what I want to know, or I can call in some old friends who owe me favors, and we can spend the next few hours finding out exactly how much pain you can endure before you break. Your choice. Santos's face went pale. Maurice runs a loan sharking operation out of a nightclub in downtown Portland. The Velvet Room. That's all I know. Not good enough. Phone. Now. Lucas tossed Wesley a burner phone he'd pulled from Santos's pocket. Wesley scrolled through the contacts and messages. Pay dirt. Santos had been coordinating with multiple people, drivers, pilots, buyers. There were at least 6 other children who'd gone through New Horizons in the past year. Wesley's jaw clenched. This was bigger than he'd thought. Chris, call Detective Parrish. Give him this address. Tell him Julius Bender is here and ready to confess. What are you going to do? Chris asked. Wesley looked at Santos. I'm going to make sure every single person involved in this nightmare pays for what they've done. And I'm going to do it before the sun comes up. Chapter 5, The Route. Wesley left Emma with Camille at Seattle Children's Hospital while he went hunting. The doctors confirmed what Lucas had suspected. Emma had been given a mild sedative, nothing harmful, and would sleep it off with no lasting effects. Camille sat by the hospital crib, refusing to leave, texting updates to Melissa every few minutes. Bring them all down, Camille had said to Wesley as he left. Every single one. The Velvet Room was in Portland's Pearl District, a trendy nightclub with a VIP entrance and bouncers who looked more like linebackers. It was 1:47 a.m. when Wesley arrived with Chris and Lucas. Benny had stayed behind to wait for Detective Parrish and ensure Julius and Santos didn't go anywhere. Wesley had changed clothes at a rest stop, trading tactical gear for a tailored suit he kept in the trunk for client meetings. Chris and Lucas had similar disguises. They looked like successful businessmen out for a night of expensive drinks and bad decisions. The bouncer at the VIP entrance barely glanced at Wesley's fake ID, courtesy of Lucas, who had connections Wesley didn't ask about, before waving them through. The club was packed despite the late hour, bass thumping through the floor, strobes painting everything in neon chaos. Wesley moved through the crowd like a ghost, his eyes scanning for security cameras, exit routes, potential threats. Old habits. Morris's office is upstairs, Lucas said into Wesley's ear, barely audible over the music. Northeast corner. 2 guards, probably armed. How do you know that? Wesley asked. I did some consulting work for Maurice 2 years ago. Security systems. Before I knew what kind of person he was. Lucas's expression was grim. Didn't finish the job once I figured it out. They made their way to the stairs, but a wall of muscle blocked their path. A security guard who looked like he ate smaller security guards for breakfast. VIP section is closed tonight, the guard said. Wesley smiled pleasantly. Maurice is expecting us. Tell him Wesley Greenwood is here about Julius Bender. The guard blinked, surprised. He spoke into a radio clipped to his collar, listened to the response, then stepped aside. Go on up, but you're getting searched first. Wesley had expected this. He raised his arms while the guard patted him down, finding nothing. They'd left their weapons in the car. Going in armed would have been suicide. This was a different kind of extraction. The VIP section was quieter, insulated from the chaos below. Dark leather couches, private booths, and track lighting that somehow made everyone look both dangerous and sophisticated. At a corner table sat Maurice Garner, a whip-thin man in his late 40s with expensive clothes and the predatory stillness of a shark. 2 more guards flanked him, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. Wesley Greenwood, Maurice said, gesturing to the couch across from him. I've been hearing your name tonight. Santos called me an hour ago from police custody, very upset. Said you ruined a lucrative business arrangement. Wesley sat, Chris and Lucas flanking him. Santos is part of a kidnapping ring that took my infant daughter. So yes, I ruined his arrangement. And now I'm here to ruin yours. Maurice laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Ruin mine? Mr. Greenwood, I think you misunderstand the situation. You're in my club, surrounded by my men. You have no weapons, no leverage. The police can't touch me. I've got judges and cops on my payroll. Santos will take the fall, Julius will disappear into a prison cell, and life goes on. Julius is cooperating with the police right now, Wesley said calmly, giving them names, addresses, financial records. Every loan you've made, every threat you've issued, every illegal deal you've brokered. By sunrise, you'll be finished. Morris's smile never wavered. Julius is a degenerate gambler who staged a kidnapping. His word against mine. And I have a team of lawyers who eat innocent men for breakfast. Wesley leaned forward. What if I told you I have Santos's phone, with messages between him and you discussing the sale of children, with evidence of money laundering through your loan operations, with documentation of bribes to officials? He'd spent the drive from Seattle combing through every byte of data on that phone. What if I told you I've already sent copies to the FBI, DEA, and IRS? Morris's smile finally cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? Wesley pulled out his own phone and showed Maurice a screenshot of an email receipt sent at 1:23 a.m. to federal.tips@fbi.gov with multiple attachments. I'm a data forensics consultant, Maurice. I know how to build an unbreakable case. And I just handed them yours on a silver platter. The guards shifted nervously. Morris's jaw clenched. You just signed your own death warrant. Maybe, Wesley agreed. But here's the thing. I also sent a dead man's switch to 5 different investigative journalists. If anything happens to me, my wife, or my daughter, all of that information goes public. Your name, your associates, your operations. You'll be front-page news, and every law enforcement agency in the country will be hunting you. Maurice stared at him, and for the first time, Wesley saw genuine uncertainty in the man's eyes. You're wondering if I'm bluffing, Wesley continued. I'm not. You can kill me right now, and you'll burn down with me. Or you can disappear, leave the country, never come back. That's the only deal on the table. And if I refuse? Wesley stood up. Then I'll make sure the next 10 years of your life are spent in a federal supermax prison, where loan sharks and child traffickers are treated real nice by the general population. Maurice was quiet for a long moment. Then he snapped his fingers, and the guards backed off. You're a bold man, Mr. Greenwood. Stupid, but bold. I prefer determined. Wesley turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Maurice, if I ever hear about you again, even a whisper that you're operating anywhere, I won't come with lawyers and evidence. I'll come with something much more permanent. He left before Maurice could respond, his heart hammering, but his expression calm. Chris and Lucas followed, and they didn't speak until they were back in the car, 3 blocks away. That was insane, Lucas said, laughing despite himself. You had nothing on him, did you? That evidence you mentioned. I have everything, Wesley interrupted. Every text, every call log, every financial transaction Santos and Julius made. I just needed Maurice to think he had a way out before the walls closed in. So he won't leave the country? Chris asked. No, he's too arrogant. He'll try to fight it. Wesley started the car, which is why I gave Detective Parrish his location 20 minutes ago, along with enough evidence to charge him with racketeering, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, money laundering, and about 15 other felonies. Chris shook his head. You magnificent bastard. Wesley's phone rang. Detective Parrish. We got them, the detective said without preamble. Julius is singing like a canary. We've already issued warrants for Santos Dodson, Maurice Garner, and 4 others. We're raiding the Velvet Room right now. Greenwood, I don't know how you did this, but I just followed the evidence, Wesley said. My daughter, safe at Children's Hospital. Your sister-in-law hasn't left her side. Parrish paused. We also found records of 6 other children who went through New Horizons. We're contacting their families now. This bust is going to make national news. Wesley felt a weight lift off his chest. Thank you, detective. Thank you. You gave us the case of the decade. Another pause. You know I have to ask where you got all this information. Client confidentiality, Wesley said. I'm a consultant, remember? Parrish laughed. Right. Well, your father-in-law is going to spend the next 20 years in prison. Santos and Maurice are looking at life sentences. And I suspect Julius is going to have a very difficult time in there, once word gets around what he did. Wesley disconnected and drove back to Seattle, the sunrise painting the sky orange and purple. He was exhausted, running on adrenaline and coffee, but he'd never felt more alive. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. Emma was released from the hospital at 9:30 a.m. Melissa had driven up from Portland with Detective Parrish escort, And when she walked into that hospital room and saw her daughter, she collapsed in tears. Wesley held them both, his family intact against all odds, and let himself feel the emotion he'd been suppressing for 12 hours. Julius Bender was arraigned that afternoon, charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, child endangerment, and a dozen other felonies. He pleaded guilty and cooperated with the prosecution, giving them enough evidence to dismantle the entire New Horizons network. 6 families got their children back. 15 people were arrested across 3 states. Maurice Garner didn't run. He was arrested at the Velvet Room at 2:14 a.m., surrounded by federal agents and local police. They found enough evidence in his office to charge him with racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and witness intimidation. His lawyers tried to fight it, but the case was airtight. Santos Dotson cooperated for a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life. He gave them names of buyers in 7 different countries. Interpol got involved. The story made international headlines. Black market adoption ring busted in Pacific Northwest. But Wesley wasn't satisfied. There was still one loose end. Chapter 7. The Trap. 2 weeks after Emma came home, Wesley sat in his basement office, staring at a name on his computer screen, Drew Godfrey. Drew had popped up in Santos's phone records, a lawyer who'd facilitated several adoptions through New Horizons. He'd covered his tracks well, using shell companies and encrypted communications, but Wesley was better. He'd found the connections, traced the money, and discovered something that made his blood boil. Drew Godfrey had known about Julius's plan from the beginning. He'd been the one to vet the buyer in Mexico City. He'd drafted the fake adoption papers. And when Santos got arrested, Drew had destroyed evidence and disappeared before the police could find him. Detective Parrish had confirmed it when Wesley brought him the evidence. Godfrey's in the wind. We have warrants, but he could be anywhere. Wesley had other ideas. He'd spent 2 weeks building a trap, using every skill he'd learned in military intelligence. He'd created a fake identity, a wealthy European businessman named Klaus Richter who was looking to adopt a healthy American infant through discreet channels. He'd paid for ads in the dark web forums where people like Drew Godfrey operated. And yesterday, Drew had taken the bait. The meeting was set for tonight at 7 p.m. in a warehouse district south of Portland. Wesley was supposed to bring $150,000 in cash. Drew would bring the baby, a child he claimed to have access to through emergency foster care connections. Detective Parrish had initially balked at the plan, but Wesley had convinced him. You need Drew in the act, attempting to sell a child. Otherwise, his lawyers will tear apart your paper trail, and he'll walk on a technicality. This way, you catch him red-handed. Parrish had finally agreed, but with conditions. Wesley would wear a wire, and there would be a full tactical team surrounding the warehouse. The moment Drew exchanged money for a child, they'd move in. Wesley stood in the police station bathroom at 6:15 p.m., letting a technician wire him up. The microphone was the size of a button, sewn into his collar. The transmitter was hidden at the small of his back. You okay? Parrish asked, appearing in the doorway. Fine. You don't have to do this, you know. We could send in an undercover officer. Drew's paranoid. He's going to do background checks, facial recognition, the works. My Klaus Richter identity is bulletproof because I built it myself. Anyone else, he'd smell it. Parrish nodded. Just remember, we need him to explicitly offer to sell you the child. Get him talking about price, logistics, all of it. Then we move in. Wesley checked his reflection in the mirror. He was dressed in an expensive suit, playing the part of a morally bankrupt businessman willing to buy a child. He looked the part. The warehouse was exactly as bleak as Wesley had expected. Rusted metal siding, broken windows, a location so far from civilization that screaming wouldn't bring help. Perfect for illegal transactions. Wesley parked his car and approached the main entrance, his footsteps echoing in the empty lot. The door was unlocked. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous and dark, lit only by streetlights filtering through the grimy windows. Mr. Richter? A voice called from the shadows. Drew Godfrey stepped into the light, a man in his early 40s with a lawyer's polished appearance and dead eyes. He was holding a car seat, and Wesley's stomach twisted when he saw a sleeping infant inside. Where did you get that child? Wesley asked, his voice steady despite the rage. Drew smiled. Does it matter? You're not here for the backstory. You're here for a product. Wesley forced himself to play the role. I need assurances. medical records, birth certificate. All provided, all legitimate looking. This is a clean transaction, Mr. Richter. You'll get everything you need to register the child in your home country. Drew set the car seat on a nearby crate. Now, do you have the money? Wesley held up a duffel bag. Right here. But I want to see the documentation first. Drew pulled out a folder and handed it over. Wesley flipped through it. Forged birth certificates, medical records, adoption papers. All of it fake, but convincing. Satisfied? Drew asked. Who is this child? Does it matter? Drew repeated. He's healthy, no family looking for him. You get what you want, I get paid, everyone wins. Wesley's jaw clenched. Someone is looking for him. His family. Drew's expression didn't change. His family gave him up through a private arrangement. They signed the papers. Legally, he's available for adoption. Through New Horizons Family Services? Drew's eyes narrowed. How do you know about? Wesley moved fast, dropping the duffel bag and lunging for the car seat. Drew tried to block him, but Wesley was trained for this. He swept Drew's legs, sending the lawyer crashing to the concrete floor, then grabbed the car seat and backed away. Police. Don't move. Officers poured through every entrance, flashlights cutting through the darkness, weapons drawn. Drew scrambled to his feet, his face contorted with rage. You son of a bitch. You set me up. Detective Parrish, you'll want to hear this, Wesley said, tapping his collar where the wire was hidden. Mr. Godfrey here just tried to sell me an infant for $150,000. I believe that's trafficking of a minor, conspiracy to commit fraud, and about a dozen other felonies. Parrish appeared from the shadows, reading Drew his rights. Drew Godfrey, you're under arrest for child trafficking, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. This is entrapment. Drew shouted as officers cuffed him. My lawyers will tear this apart. Entrapment requires law enforcement to induce someone to commit a crime they weren't already predisposed to commit, Wesley said calmly. You've been selling children for years. I just gave you another opportunity. That's not entrapment. That's you doing what you've always done. Parrish took the car seat from Wesley, peering at the sleeping infant inside. EMTs are en route to check him over. We traced his origin. He was reported missing from a foster home in Tacoma 3 days ago. Family's been frantic. Wesley felt the satisfaction settle over him like a warm blanket. Another child saved. Another monster caught. Chapter 8. The Trial. The trials happened fast, by legal standards. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence, and most of the defendants took plea deals to avoid life sentences. Julius Bender went first. He pleaded guilty in exchange for 20 years in a medium-security prison. At his sentencing, Melissa read a victim impact statement that brought the entire courtroom to tears. You were my father, she said, her voice shaking. I trusted you with the most precious thing in my life, and you tried to sell her like she was property. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed every value you ever taught me about family. I hope you spend every day of your sentence thinking about what you destroyed. Julius wept in his orange jumpsuit, but said nothing. Santos Dotson got 25 years. Maurice Garner got life without parole, the judge citing his extensive criminal history and the particularly heinous nature of profiting from the suffering of children. Drew Godfrey fought his charges, confident his lawyers could find a loophole. They couldn't. The wire recording was damning, and the child he'd tried to sell testified through a guardian ad litem about his kidnapping from the foster home. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At his sentencing, the judge looked at Drew with undisguised contempt. You are a lawyer, Mr. Godfrey. You took an oath to uphold the law, to protect the vulnerable. Instead, you preyed on the most innocent among us. You facilitated the kidnapping and sale of children, treating them as commodities. This court finds no mitigating factors in your behavior. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Drew's face went white. No, you can't. I can, and I have. Take him away. Wesley watched from the gallery as Drew was let out in chains, screaming about appeals and injustice. Melissa sat beside him, holding Emma, now nearly 13 months old, babbling and trying to grab at everything. Is it over? Melissa whispered. It's over, Wesley confirmed. But there was one more thing he needed to do. Chapter 9. Full Circle. 6 months after the trials, Wesley and Melissa hosted a barbecue at their house. It was a warm July afternoon, The kind of perfect summer day that made you forget about darkness in the world. In their backyard were the families of the 6 children who'd been rescued from New Horizons. Some of the kids were too young to understand what had happened. Emma certainly was, but the parents understood. They understood what Wesley had risked, what he'd done to bring their children home. To Wesley, said Terry Lopez, the mother of a 2-year-old boy who'd been taken from a park in Eugene. She raised her glass of lemonade. The man who gave us our lives back. Everyone cheered. Wesley felt his face flush with embarrassment. I just did what anyone would. No, interrupted Stephen Wise, father of 3-year-old twins who'd been abducted from a daycare. You did what most people couldn't. You didn't wait for the system. You didn't sit back and hope. You hunted them down and made them pay. Wesley looked at Melissa, who was smiling at him with tears in her eyes. I had help, he said. Detective Parrish and his team, my old unit, everyone who believed these children deserved justice. But you were the catalyst, Parrish said, appearing from the kitchen with a plate of burgers. He'd become a friend over the past months, often stopping by to check on Emma. Without your investigation, we'd still be chasing ghosts. The afternoon wore on. Children played on the swing set Wesley had installed, Emma toddling after the older kids, laughing when they pushed her on the baby swing. Parents swapped stories, contact information, promises to stay in touch. As the sun began to set, Wesley found himself alone on the back porch for a moment, watching the families gathered in his yard. Melissa came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. Do you have any regrets? She asked quietly. Wesley thought about that question. He'd killed a man. Well, shot him in the shoulder, but it could have been lethal. He'd threatened others. He'd operated outside the law in ways that would have landed him in prison if things had gone differently. No, he said finally. I'd do it all again. Even knowing what my father did. What he tried to do. Wesley turned to face her. Your father made his choices. They don't reflect on you. And Emma will never know him, which is probably for the best. Melissa leaned against him, and they stood there in comfortable silence for a while, watching their daughter play. Camille told me something interesting, Melissa said eventually. She said Julius had a visitor in prison last month. Wesley's jaw tightened. Who? Teresa's sister, his former sister-in-law. Apparently, she told Julius that Teresa would have been ashamed of him, that he dishonored her memory and destroyed the family she loved. Julius broke down completely. Good, Wesley said without sympathy. The guards have him on suicide watch now. Wesley felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just emptiness where concern for Julius Bender used to be. He made his bed. Later that evening, after all the guests had left and Emma was asleep in her crib, Wesley went down to his basement office. He opened a locked drawer and pulled out a file folder labeled New Horizons, Remaining Threads. Inside were names of people who'd gotten away. Buyers who'd successfully adopted children through the ring before it was busted. People who were living normal lives with stolen children, and the law couldn't touch them because the adoptions had been finalized before the investigation began. Wesley stared at those names for a long time. Then he put the folder back in the drawer and locked it. Some battles you fought. Some you had to let go. He went upstairs and found Melissa in Emma's nursery, just watching their daughter sleep. Everything okay? Melissa whispered. Everything's perfect, Wesley said, and meant it. They stood together in the doorway, watching their daughter breathe, her little chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of sleep. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served. Their family was whole. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases for Wesley to work, new adventures for Emma as she grew. But tonight, they had peace. And for the first time in months, Wesley Greenwood slept without nightmares, knowing he'd protected what mattered most. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.